Once upon a time, this was a perfectly decent space marine. Now, he's fallen from grace. In today's mission, I'm kitbashing yet another Dark Angel to add to my growing ragtag band of Fallen. We'll be doing weapon swaps, armor exchanges, and making cloaks and loincloths from materials that's not normally seen in the hobby. Oh, and all this chaos? This is your fault. This is Cursed Crusader Arts. We begin with the body of a Primaris Intercessor, sourced from the Dark Angels Combat Patrol that has no Dark Angels in it. Now, I'm not doing any reposing of the miniature this time, so I want to make the most of what we already have. He's moving forwards at a steady pace, the back of his left foot raised as he takes another step forward, so let's keep this in mind as the project evolves. In previous Fallen Angel videos, some of you have suggested to make some of these characters look a little bit more chaotic, so I ordered a whole bunch of spare Chaos Marine parts, including heads, arms, weapons, and shoulder pads, and we'll be using some of these parts to tell a story about a fallen angel that is slightly more chaotically aligned than his brethren. To start this kitbash transformation, I'm first attaching a Chaos Marine power pack. Previous Fallen I've built have more ramshackle power packs, modified from loyal Primaris parts, into something that's a bit more indicative of the Chaos designs. But there's no need for modifications this time around. There's a nice bit of Chaos trim, including the 8-pointed star, which makes it obvious that this Dark Angel is no longer loyal. Next are the weapons, and this time I want a pretty standard looking loadout, picking out a chainsword and a bolt pistol. Taking advantage of the relaxed pose, I want the weapon to be lowered and not currently in use. This arm holds the chainsword out at a slightly wider position, and I dry fit this with a bit of blue tack just to make sure that it fits my vision. However, there is a minor problem that is going to require breaking out my new hobby saw. This other arm doesn't hold the chainsaw out as wide from the body as the other one, so it isn't really suitable for what I'm after, but I find that the chainsword itself is much more fitting. If we refer back to the inspiration of my particular flavour of Fallen, found within the 5th edition Chaos Space Marines Codex, the arrows of the pointed star are a prominent detail. They're all over the armour, weapons and cloaks, and as a result I love this chainsword with the pointed arrow running along the length of the blade. All I have to do is remove the weapons from the arms and swap them around. To do this, I break out the new hobby saw, and after getting it blessed by the Chaos Gods with a suitable sacrifice, the vambraces end in a point, stretching over the wrist and onto the back of the hand, so this isn't going to really give us a clean spot to cut with our saw. So instead I choose to saw off the chainsword blades themselves above the hand which holds the handle. Once both blades have been removed, we can begin reattaching them to the arms that we want to use. This is done by drilling a hole into the chainsaw deep enough to add a paperclip pin with superglue. Once secure, I put a blob of black paint on the end of the pin and press it to the arm, marking the plastic to show where to drill on the other side and ensure that everything lines up correctly. Then I drill the second hole and glue the chainsword blade into the new arm. If there are any gaps, you can always fill this in with putty later. Then I dry fit the reconstructed arm to the body and attach a Dark Angel shoulder pad. For the other arm, we're using a bolt pistol, and I want to give this feeling of the Fallen walking up to a loyalist in order to execute them. First, I pick out an arm that has the correct angle, following a similar mindset to how I picked out the chainsword. The pose is great, but I don't really want an Eye of Horus on the pistol. I feel that it strays a little too far away from the concept of runaway renegades, and leans too much towards the Black Legion ideology. Instead, I pick another pistol with part of the Chaos Star on the body of the weapon, keeping the same themes in place as before. I pin this together in the same way as I did the chainswords previously, and apply another shoulder pad, this time a Chaos one with the 8-pointed star. Finally, it's time for the head, and the spare parts I bought off eBay gave me a few options to choose from. In the end, I went with a horned helmet with the divided faceplate, really leaning into the fallen and corrupted feeling of the model. Then I needed to remove the horns using my hobby knife to give room for the hood. I made sure to preserve as much of the horns as possible so that they can be used in another project. And then I glue all of the parts into place, angling them to get the pose that I want, giving me this. This is our base model, and it's a pretty good kitbashing conversion of a Space Marine that is quite striking. The pieces used were specifically chosen to tell the story that we wanted, making sure to pick parts that fit the pose and show the correct kind of iconography, but we're not done yet. We need to go to the next level and use unconventional tools and materials to make our Chaos Marine really look like a true fallen Dark Angel. We're beginning with making a bit of a tabard to sit between his legs, and to make this we're using cigarette papers and PVA glue. This material is easily accessible and extremely cheap. I rip up the papers and begin to layer them on top of one another, adding thinned down PVA glue between each layer, using about 6 or 7 pieces. Doing this on some greaseproof paper will make it easier to remove and pick up once it's dry. The reason we do this is so that we can add more detail. The wet paper is going to naturally create folds that are in scale with the material and add some texture variation. Gently push this into place and shape it. Then let it dry. But be careful, the PVA glue alone isn't going to be enough to hold the paper onto the miniature forever. To secure this, add a few drops of superglue along anywhere the paper is in contact with the miniature. This dries fast, secures the new part, and adds a harder layer to prevent it from breaking. Next is the cloak. To add a new texture and be thematic to the concept of a rugged runaway scavenger, we're going to use muslin for our cloaks. Muslin is a fabric that is woven together, often called cheesecloth. We want to see the holes, tears and loose threads to sell the idea of disorder at a glance from the tabletop. I start off with some scraps that I've prepared in advance. This was done by cutting up strips and fraying them at the edges. Then, I soak them in watered down black acrylic paint and squeeze out the excess water. This means that when we prime our model, any missed strands will look grey or black, blending in with the rest of the miniature when you paint it. Now, to actually apply the muslin, I do it in 2 stages. First the hood, and then the cloak. For the hood, I take a small rectangle and place it over the head. Using an old brush, I apply watered down PVA to help mould the fabric around the surface of the head and tuck in any loose threads. Then I want to push the sides of the hood around, under the power pack, and under the arms. This is going to help us sell the idea of the cloak being a single piece, whilst keeping any excess out of the way. Now, before we move on, I want to give you another tip for making cloaks with muslin. It's produced in many sizes, using a measurement known as a thread count, which tells you how tightly the threads are woven together across 1 square inch. When you make your cloaks, if you find that the gaps are too big and noticeable, you can do one of 2 things. You could look for a material with a higher thread count. This means that the threads are more tightly woven together, creating smaller holes. But this could also increase the price of the material, as you'll need to begin looking into other creative hobbies such as cross stitch. Alternatively, you can layer your muslin. Personally, I overlap 2 layers, making sure that it's lined up in such a way that the holes look smaller, by having the threads of the top layer overlap the holes of the bottom layer. This is fine enough that it isn't too thick, but still looks great while also maintaining the rugged look and keeping the price down. Moving on to making the cloak, you can see me layer up the fabric, gluing them together with the watered down PVA. I've also created an incision that goes at least halfway down the length of the fabric. This is to help you apply the cloak to the miniature by using the separate parts to go around the power pack and let you move them over the shoulders. For this Fallen, I'm just giving him a hooded cloak instead of the whole robe. So I push the fabric around and under the arms to secure it in place, making sure that it ties into the fabric used for the hood. And now we have a Fallen Dark Angel. All that's left are to add more details for visual interest. First, a few extra bits of fabric suggest the attempt to repair their cloaks with whatever usable materials they can find on the battlefield. A tilt shield gives the fallen angel a connection to his former chapter and helps to move the miniature farther away from the stock image of a normal Space Marine. Then we can add battle damage, which is created with a hobby knife or a drill, making the armour look well worn and aged, long overdue for a proper repair. And finally, a layer of thinned down liquid green stuff can add extra texture that will show through when you paint the miniature. So here it is with the Chaos Black primer. This is a great way to unify the entire miniature so that you can see if it needs anything else. You can see that I've created a chain using some hobby wire and various skulls, attaching it to the cloak to show the trophies this Chaos Marine has collected. In my mind, he always knew that he'd never be accepted back into the Dark Angels, and is bitterly jealous of the Redeemed. As a result, this has made him fall further into Chaos than some of the others, and the skulls, in my mind at least, are of other Dark Angels who have been sent to hunt him down. So what do you think? Is this chaosy enough for you? I purposely avoided using mutations as I see these guys more like renegades, akin to the Red Corsairs, rather than full-on chaos worshippers in the warp surrounded by demonic energy. I still have room for a few more Fallen for this squad, so let me know what you'd like to see next, and whatever you do, make things, have fun, and I'll see you next time on Cursed Crusader Arts.